Happy New Year to everyone. Thanks for tuning back in 2024 to the Replatform podcast, sponsored by Patchworks and hosted by me, James Gurd, and Paul Rogers. We bring you interviews of industry thought leaders, C-suite of tech, companies and retailers. And also we do talking heads around like interesting topics in the industry where me and Paul ramble on about what we're seeing in the industry. All we ask in return is you tell other people about the podcast, share or like our posts on LinkedIn and social media. And if it's your first time listening, please do give us a rating wherever you are listening to the show. Thanks, and we hope you enjoy today's episode. So we are doing our usual annual roundup. So doing the 2023 e-commerce platform technology roundup, talking about what we've seen in the industry, things that got our attention last year, tech that's been trending, etc. And I think the market context for this one is 2023 was definitely a more challenging year for e-commerce. Replatforming has slowed down, and that inevitably has had an impact on the ancillary technologies that normally go into replatforming projects, all the third-party apps and ecosystem. So the year-on-year growth for e-commerce software revenue dropped from 2022 between 2021 and 2022. And although growth's been a bit higher this year, it's still expected to be significantly lower than it was in 2021. So I think growth was about 23-24% in 21. In 22, it was 11%, and this year's expected to be around 16%. And there's been lots of things impacting it. We've had high inflation, currency exchange issues, turbulent economies, and that hasn't bottomed out yet. And we've got electoral uncertainty coming into next year as well in key markets like UK and US. So we're expecting that turbulence to carry on a bit, but also one of the key things has been the continued growth of physical commerce, which we'll talk about in a minute. And that's obviously had an impact on e-commerce growth in certain verticals, and it's impacting budgets. So I think that's the key market context. Paul, anything you want to add in terms of like the overall context for e-commerce this year or last year? Sorry.
No, not at all. I think the only other one is that brands and retailers aren't performing as well as they were over the last couple of years, obviously. And I think Q3 in particular was pretty tough. Q4 better, Q1 very good. So I think that would be the only other thing where people just aren't, forecasting the growth that they were spending as much money.
Yeah, exactly. I've definitely seen a slowdown in interest in big CapEx projects because people are inevitably wanting to push that and see what happens, doubling down on like the operational side and trying to drive sales, margin, profitability, etc. So when we were talking about this episode, we thought, like, how do we structure it? We're going to talk about a big trend, key platforms, third-party apps and tech around it, and then a section on B2B towards the end. But the big trend that you flagged, so do you want to talk about it first? It's about omnichannel being back. And there's an inevitability towards this because obviously the pandemic saw physical retail shut down. Then we've had a slow return initially after we came out of lockdowns into 2022. And then in 2022 and 2023, it's really picked up and more people are back in store. And it doesn't mean e-commerce has shrunk, but it means that the growth rate in e-commerce has been hit because some of that spend pattern's been switched back into physical environment. What have you seen across your client base? What are you seeing in the wider market?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I think Omni has become more of a focus again. And also we work with quite a lot of brands that have never done physical retail before, but now see it as a really interesting channel. And I think part of that has definitely come from, I think one is, it can be a really good brand awareness channel. Like if you're a fashion brand that's doing really well, like there are certain locations where that if you put a physical store there, you're going to reach, a certain customer, and that's going to really help you build your brand. But I think the interesting thing has recently is that the cost of opening stores has gone down, where, rent has gone down. Obviously other costs around it has gone up, but the actual kind of, rental agreements and things like that have gone down. And then the cost of acquiring customers online has gone up. And I think the other thing is one of the biggest trends for this year that we actually don't have in here, but we've kind of both hinted at a little bit with what we've written down, is measurement and data. And I think particularly online, and particularly with the way the market is, a lot of people essentially wanting to spend less on top of funnel activity unless they can really measure the impact. And I think physical retail stores, if done well, are actually pretty measurable. And you know that you're going to attract a certain level of new customers. Mm-hmm. And I think as people are trying to kind of broaden what they're doing to like build brand awareness and acquire new customers, I think physical retail has been really interesting. And that's probably more specific to the types of brands that we're working with, who are like fashion brands that are at a certain level but have typically grown online and maybe via wholesale than via physical retail.
Yeah, I think that's a really important element, that wholesale one, because the D2C brands, because the online growth is contracting, and they're starting to see that actually, to hit those big future growth numbers, relying purely online is not going to achieve that. Therefore, they're experimenting with different physical retail opportunities. So you've got the pop-up stores, which are popular. There's a lot of US brands that they've done. I mean, in the UK as well. But yeah, the wholesale bit I've seen is interesting because it's being embraced by small, medium, and big businesses. So I've worked with some SMEs where they've really pushed the wholesale channel. And interestingly, they're starting to listen and talk about having people within their business whose role it is to manage those accounts, and not just from those wholesalers from the physical store selling point of view, but also from the e-commerce store point of view, to maximize digital store revenue and digital store product visibility. So those roles have typically been the preserve of like big consumer brands who, for example, big brands like Mars is working with online grocers. But actually now I'm seeing it in other areas like fashion, beauty, where people are starting to listen and think about having those expertise, where previously selling online via wholesale was send them the product information, fulfill the orders, but there is no strategic relationship between the e-commerce teams. So yeah, it's definitely interesting to see how that's going to go next year. I mean, the predictions are that wholesale piece is only going to grow rapidly next year anyway.
I think it is I mean, again, we didn't really touch on this, but that's kind of triggered me to think about some things that came up in our like review of Q4. And I think wholesale is at an interesting point, but it just differs at like different areas of the industry. So I think someone like Next are flying at the moment. Obviously, they've just bought Fatface, who we work together with. But they're also just doing lots of really smart stuff around multi-brand. And actually, so I believe they're going into premium early next year. And a lot of our clients are already talking about it, and they're propositioning it really well. Obviously, people like Farfetch and Matches have been widely reported to not be doing particularly well. So there's a gap there. I think M&S are doing similar things as well. And some of the other kind of retailers are starting to look at doing similar things. But I think the retailers or the multi-brand retailers like ASOS and a number of others at kind of that level, Shoe, some of the other ones have been so aggressive with discounting recently. And I think one of the biggest things that I'm hoping next year, I think that we'll see next year, is some of those businesses will really struggle, because as a multi-brand business, I just don't see how they can discount on that level when their margins are relatively low. And acquiring a new customer for those businesses is like, it just can't be profitable. So I think we've obviously seen it with some multi-brand retailers already, but I think it'll be interesting to see how that goes and whether more big retailers will go under as well, or at least face challenges.
Yeah, and I think that leads us nicely on to let's cover the B2B and wholesale bit, because this obviously links into the technology piece, and B2B e-commerce growth has outpaced B2C, and it definitely feels like the platforms have taken B2B a bit more seriously in terms of feature rollout. We've talked about the SaaS world, and BigCommerce have made real gains in B2B capability. They went significantly ahead of Shopify in that by the acquisitions. Bundle B2B was a while back, quotations, but they've ramped up the customer portal, the invoice portal. They've improved processes for like payment and settlement of multiple invoices, centralized purchase workflows, all the stuff that a B2B lean business needs and wants to see in a platform, but through a modern interface. So it's not like, really clunky old school green screen stuff. So I know BigCommerce is new customer acquisition in the B2B space has been really good this year. I'm working on a potential project with them at the moment, and I still see that as a really strong offering. But the technology, I think, has democratized this a bit, because it's simpler for businesses with a B2B commerce arm to launch sites and to manage that and have really good self-service and sales tooling as well. So then let's flip to the Shopify, because I find this interesting, and you can talk more about this, but Shopify have definitely sharpened their tools around B2B when it didn't look like it was a key part of their strategy or roadmap, but they've acquired Fair, the B2B marketplace. They've announced more features. Where do you see this from a tech point of view? Where do you see Shopify being in in 2024?
So I think Shopify invested in Fair, which is interesting, but I think the biggest thing is more around how they're looking at targeting or growing their B2B market share. And I think they've, similarly to how they approached international, I think for the last couple of years, they approached a company called acquired a company called Handshake a few years ago. No one really knew what was going on. Handshake became a wholesale marketplace, or handshake.com became a wholesale marketplace. And then there wasn't really too much talked about it. And then I think that team has then gradually been merged into other teams, and then they've kind of built out the fundamentals of B2B in the core platform. But I think they've approached it in a similar way to international, where they've kind of been working in the background to like retroactively build some of those features into their core platform. So things like price books, the entity of a company, stuff like that. They've been working on, and I think now they've got to a point where their foundations are really strong within the core, but there's they've still got a lot of catching up to do around kind of building around that ecosystem, building out some of those kind of core functionalities to be at the same level as BigCommerce or even Adobe, whoever else. But I do think they're releasing a lot of functionality very regularly. There's a lot coming next year that was announced at the Enterprise Summit in LA, and I think they are very they want to be very aggressive in that market. But I think it'll be interesting because I think B2B is harder. So Shopify, obviously well known for being exceptional at marketing and fairly strong at the commercial side, but I think B2B is slower. I think a lot of people working in B2B and manufacturing aren't going to like the big industry trade events, and I think it will take longer for them to like really push it. But equally, if they go and win a few massive ones, then they're definitely making progress. But I think they've still got a way to go until they're kind of really competing against some of the big platforms. But equally, B2B is pretty disparate, so it's very different.
It is, and from a technology point of view, there is so much choice now. What for me, the big shift is that for SMEs, the SaaS B2B products are maturing really nicely and have really robust functionality. At enterprise level, it often opens up a different discussion because you, especially if you're in really complex industries like manufacturing or plant machinery, where you have really complicated sales cycles, like huge configuration and real complexity around the product model and the pricing, then you often need greater degree of customization and deeper data models. And then you open up all the big enterprise players. And there are many of them, whether that's a Salesforce, a Spryker, you name it, you keep going. But B2B, definitely, wholesale B2B, I think is going to just continue to grow. And actually, it's expected to grow quite sharply and continue to outpace B2C. So I think those businesses out there who are brands wanting to sell to wholesale channels and want to improve automation and want to improve tooling, now's the time to go and look at the market, because take a look at, if you are a B2C store on Shopify and you need a basic B2B wholesale channel, that's the path of least resistance. If you're not already on a platform like that, then you need to look at the likes of BigCommerce, especially Shopify's, other platforms like Centra, Headless out there, which have B2B capability, are really locked down, which is going to give you the fastest speed to market for a proof of concept store. You'd be surprised sometimes actually how cheaply and quickly you can launch a basic storefront with a decent customer experience. But let's continue the platform theme. So let's talk about overall platform market, because obviously we spend a lot of time looking at platforms and doing re-platforming projects and selecting technology. It definitely feels like, let's do the headline, let's get the elephant out of the room. It feels like it's been Shopify's year. Is that a good thing? Here's my question. So Shopify is, from a marketing point of view, they are smashing it. The way they are positioning the roadmap, how they're investing, what was it, over 3,000 developers, I think, or something like that. Their pace of change has gone up massively. We've talked about this before. They've gone through and identified the key reasons people think Shopify is not suitable to bigger businesses and gone, let's remove this gradually. They still got work to do around multi-store. It's still not up there in terms of like native capability in the ways like a Salesforce or Adobe might be, but they are getting through that quickly. And it feels that now in a certain type of RFP, that whereas it used to be which 2 or 3 platforms you look at, there are people starting with, is there any reason we shouldn't be on Shopify? And I think the mindset in especially in brands seems to have shifted. So here's my question. Is it a good thing that Shopify is becoming so dominant? Or are we going to see the next Salesforce?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting. I don't want to see the next Salesforce. I think Shopify is very different to anyone that's ever been in the market. I don't think we've ever seen anyone with their market share. They've got over 3 million stores. I don't think we've seen anyone with their resources. So they've got 4,000 developers, of which 2,000 are focused purely on R&D. And I don't think we've seen anyone growing at the rate they're growing at. But what I do think will be interesting is where it leads, because I see Shopify becoming, I think there will be niches that Shopify won't be the market leader in, and I think they already are. And I think even if you look at, for certain types of brands, like right now, a Centra might be functionally a better fit, or, in enterprise, someone like Ecommerce tools could functionally be a better fit. But I do think Shopify is becoming like a mainstream operating system to a certain extent. The thing that I think will be interesting is and I think the other thing is they're making a lot of quiet moves, like you said about Fair before and Shopify Collective, and, they're improving POS, they're building more order management into the platform. It almost feels like they're, going like this, and actually, in 4 years' time, in their world, do they see a brand having an ERP? Or, have they got a bigger share? I think there's a lot of question marks over that.
Yeah.
And I personally see it as, I think it's interesting. I do think they are commoditizing, and I think there's pros and cons to that. I think I like Shopify. I love what they've done for e-com. I think they've enabled a lot of brands to grow and build better experiences and everything else. But the only thing is they have made some fairly aggressive moves in the past, particularly around tech partners. They obviously, in certain places, the platform doesn't necessarily advocate choice. And I think they are going to be very dominant. I personally, I think a lot of people have seen Toby talk and kind of see his vision. And I do think they'll commoditize a lot of stuff, and they'll bring the barrier to entry down. I think they'll go low code and then allow for complexity, or even no code and then allow for complexity. But I think that it's a good thing, but there's definitely risks with Shopify getting to a certain level of dominance. And I think they could feasibly control the ecosystem a little bit. And it's interesting when I spoke to you about this and other people, it's like a lot of people think Shopify are going to increase their costs a lot in the future, whereas I don't see it like that. I see it more as it's almost like everyone's on Shopify. That's not where their income comes from. It's more they'll make more money through everything that needs to be active in the ecosystem. And
yeah,
I think it'd be interesting.
I guess because I do the dull side of projects, right? I look at all of the operational, the process, within which the governance and the risk charts and risk management's a classic thing. And in the back of my head, I have this. We've seen it before, where build an audience, monetize the audience, build an audience, monetize it. I know Shopify are going through that process of monetizing, driving profitability out of payments, and there are cost implications to using payments and the benefits that gives you on their ecosystem rather than using a third-party gateway. But I would not be surprised if at some point they nudge up that core platform license fee, because they've got a long way to go in that license fee before, even with the additional work you have to do on Shopify to achieve some of the things that maybe you get natively out of the box with a Salesforce and Adobe. But the cost model is still significantly less. We've looked at it for like a 300 million plus business, and we know it's significantly less. So there's wriggle room for them to go, do you know what? It's 0.25, it's 0.3%. So yeah, I know what you mean. Like, you're more closely connected and you don't see any talk of that. But I think businesses need to factor in what if those costs go up when they're thinking about their cost model, because you just never know.
Completely agree. And within the contracts, there are, they have room to do that. And I think they probably will do it at times, but I don't think that'll be their big play. So I think it'll be more, pay to play in Shopify's world. Almost.
It's funny, isn't it? Because when we started this podcast in 2019, I was definitely, I was less in the Shopify camp than you. And I thought Shopify's good, but I saw it as a more basic platform. And I thought it's got lots of potential. It's great for D2C brands. I've definitely changed my viewpoint. Shopify is strong in so many areas now, although there's a lot of nuance in some of the like omnichannel and multi-store processes. The only thing that I have an issue with is the way that I see the leadership in some of their social activities, especially on LinkedIn, where they are evangelical about Shopify's best for everything. It's right for everyone. It's the cheapest for everything. And I'd like to see more nuance in that and less evangelical attitude, because I find that dangerous, because it's not the right platform for every business. If it was, you wouldn't need other platforms when you bloody well do. And choice is important. And I think encouraging choice rather than shouting or shooting down alternatives is more positive for the industry. So that's my only bit of caution around Shopify. But yeah, overall, their year, very impressive roadmap and future plans for enterprise for next year. Composable. Let's talk about that, because I think in 2022, the amount of noise and PR around composable, Mac composable was huge. And we know of a few projects which went down a fully composable route and burnt a lot of money. One which I think sacked off well over £1 million before it pivoted to an alternative tech. And I'm not denigrating composable or Mac as the problem, but evangelizing things and pushing things to businesses where they're not prepared for it isn't a good thing. So we've seen a slowdown in the number of new projects go down that full route. And people, I think I've seen people approaching composable as a strategy of, I want a flexible platform where I can easily isolate and retire elements, or I can integrate specialist third parties, but I don't need to build everything from scratch and create my own package business capabilities from a completely composable stack, and therefore build things that actually exist in most platforms that I can just turn on. Are you seeing the same? Do you think the focus around composability and who it's right for has shifted?
Yeah, so I think we've got a really similar view on this. We obviously talk about it all the time. I think that the fundamental process and thinking around composable makes complete sense. And I think the technologies that we're probably thinking of when we talk about maybe coming down market when they probably shouldn't have, I think have probably shot themselves in the foot a little bit, because I think they're fundamentally good technology, makes complete sense over here. But I think what's happened is where the market has been not struggling, but just not been as strong as it was, they've just come down here. And then now you see these enterprise solutions that are built purely for complexity, targeting £1 million brands. And I think that's been the problem. And I think there's then been a number of failed projects that have then led to some of those platforms not being seen as positively as they have been in the past. I think the Mac Alliance is really interesting. So that was a big part of the composable movement. I think 18 months ago, 2 years ago, even a year ago, I would go every CTO I spoke to just wanted to be involved in the Mac Alliance and, wanted to learn more about the Mac Alliance, wanted to invest their budget into the Mac Alliance. Whereas now every CTO I speak to, and this is really, really interesting, is just talking about SaaS and, how SaaS benefits businesses in different areas. And I think, a lot of the same principles around composable are still there, but I think people are looking to invest maybe in different areas than they might have been 2 years ago. I think, complexity was the sensible move before, and actually building IP around being able to build, customize to your requirement. Now it feels like people are more looking to use solutions that do a high percentage of the work and then invest in the areas that are going to grow your business or bring you new customers or whatever.
Yeah, definitely. This leads on to our next point, which is the that integration layers are trending again. Not that they never went out of fashion in terms of usefulness and projects, but I definitely felt that for a couple of years there were fewer of my clients talking about it or putting the time and effort into it. But actually now that specifically in the SME space that I work in, where we're talking businesses that like 10 million to 50 million, that because they want to get to a future state of composability, but they're not going to invest in something like e-commerce tools because it's just not right for them. They don't want to have that level of control and complete and utter flexibility. But what they want to be able to do is put themselves in the position where in the future, when they need to plug in a new system to e-commerce, that they have that isolation of back end and the front end commerce piece, and that they have that ability to do data transformation through that integration layer, so that they don't have to heavily customize commerce or, God forbid, do customization work in ERP, which is always more expensive, time consuming and risky. So I've definitely seen that. And the bigger business I work with, it seems to have been Scayle and MuleSoft are the ones that are every single project. Those are the two that are in there. But the SME space, I've seen Patchworks come back into a lot more conversations, and we've had conversations about this in the past, and we think that their last 12 months have been really stellar. I think Jim Herbert, since he's got in, has made a massive difference. They've sharpened their focus on the roadmap. They've improved the capabilities. They've added more connectors. They put that visual editor for creating data flow. So they're helping to create this low code, no code ability. It's very rare that anything's no code, but yeah, it's just it feels like more smaller businesses now are buying into the benefit of using an integration specialist like that, rather than trying to just rely on out-of-the-box connectors and then a integration partner doing custom development. Are you seeing the same? Do you think it's fair to say that integration's sexy again?
I think it's definitely, I think so. Like a lot of, particularly like some of the bigger businesses I've worked with have definitely invested budget in trying to use one system to pass data around, all of their systems, or like one solution to pass data around all their systems. Yeah, definitely. I think I completely agree on the Patchworks piece. I think it's, crazy the impact, or you're assuming it's all Jim, but has had over there, and, they're doing a lot around partnerships, a lot around positioning. Like, I think they've, had a really solid year as well. I then think you've got niche players. I completely agree with everything you said. The only other thing I would say is there's also a lot of random small players in that market that charge an absolute fortune. But I think the really interesting thing that I think around this space is it'd just be interesting to see where it is in 3 years. Because I wonder whether we saw Shopify, build out their connectors a couple of years ago, NetSuite, and that are pre-packaged connectors for D365, NetSuite, Manhattan, a few others. And I think I don't think they've taken off. I've never known anyone to use them. It'd be interesting to see if, and
there's a good reason. Because every time someone uses a default connector, they realize that the 80% it covers is the easy stuff. Any custom data flows, any custom data values that you need to pass, or any transformation work, then all of a sudden the connector doesn't work, and then the cost to add on the customization.
Yeah, exactly. And I do think some of the integrated.io solutions, which is Scayle as well, some of those aren't really built for customization, stuff like that. But I think it'll be interesting in 3 years or so to see whether there is a lot of movement towards no code, because I think all of the front office solutions have invested in building well documented, best in class APIs, but all of the back office system, every single one, still doesn't function in that way. So it'll be interesting to see how this moves forward. Because I think 2 years ago, I probably would have expected that this area wouldn't have been as big, but it is. So interested to see where it's at.
And to be honest, last year, I wouldn't have expected in 12 months' time I'd be sitting there saying I'm really impressed with Patchworks. And I don't mean this to call them out specifically, but I think they definitely had they dropped the ball on some of the way that they approach projects and the way that they handle like specs and documentation. But it's good. It's good that they fixed that and that they're now back and the product's stronger. And as we say in all elements of the e-commerce market, competition is good. And when strong players drop off and it leaves only a few left, I think that can create a little bit of laziness when it's easy to win business. So it's good to have healthy integration spark it. Now let's talk about the third. We'll do the third-party apps bit in a minute. But next thing is new platforms. So we've talked about a couple of these before. Now it's really interesting because you look at Gartner's quadrant, you look at Forrester's Wave, and I think they're useful to keep an eye on what those big consultancies are rating and how they're moving around in their quadrants or their wave definitions. And it's really interesting to see proprietary platforms like THG Ingenuity in Gartner's quadrant, and they seem to be trying to fix some of the concerns people have had over the roadmap and the operability of the platform. So again, that's always useful to know. But the big changes this year are two platforms we've had on the podcast. So number one is Centra, and number two is Scayle. So I know Centra's done really well. They won Paul Smith, which has launched B2B with Ed and the team at LimeSharp, and B2C's coming Q1 next year. They've got H&M Group and Me&M, so they've got some big profile clients. So what's impressed you about Centra, and why should UK businesses be looking at them as well?
Yeah, so I really like Centra. I evaluated them quite a long time ago, and I think they were really strong then, but they were very, very niche. Whereas now, I think they've picked up some amazing brands. Like those ones are all massive wins in the UK, but they've also won like Samso in Denmark, who are an amazing brand. And then they've got this because there's so many people come into this market. You look at Shopware, like you say, Spryker came into the UK market for B2C a while back. Like there's loads of others that kind of just come out of nowhere, but their portfolio, particularly in fashion, is insane. Like, Our Legacy, Sandquist, there's so many others. And I think that one, they've built a really good ecosystem of like creative focused agencies that have the engineering teams to work in the headless area. So I think that's really good. I think they've built a solid feature set specifically for fashion. And I think now they seem to be doubling down on the kind of order management and omni side, which they know their major competitors aren't strong in at the moment. So I've just think they're a really solid platform for fashion. I think, and I've said this to them before as well, and I think you would say the exact same thing. The thing that they need to do is, a lot of brands aren't necessarily, or they can be scared by headless. And I think they need to essentially address that head on. So they need to show the benefits of being headless and, how some of the brands that they're working with, like the Nudies and Ascets and whoever else, are benefiting as a result of having more openness in the front end and the stack they've got. But overall, I think they're really solid actually. And I think they kind of sit really nicely in between the SaaS players and the, best of breed or composable platforms.
Yeah, definitely. I really, what impresses me about them is the philosophy and attitude, and they're very collaborative. And I love working with technology partners who are collaborative during the process of a build, even though an agency is doing the build, and they are adding value and they are listening to the clients. And I guess one of the great advantages Centra have, being focused purely on fashion and lifestyle, is that there is commonality in terms of feature demand. And they get that great ability that when a couple of big customers say, we really need this functionality, maybe it's something to do with the omnichannel and stock visibility and ordering, or maybe it's a merchandising, they are quite responsive in, okay, we'll put this into our roadmap. And I think that's a massive benefit if you're a potential customer looking at a vendor, of how can you influence it, because you can't do that so directly with some of the bigger players like a Salesforce. Yes, you have customer success teams. Yes, you get feedback, but unless you're one of the massive fish, it's very hard to directly get something influenced so quickly in a roadmap. So I do like that. The other platform that I've been quite impressed by actually, and although it's a completely different proposition, is Scayle. And the reason why I think it's worth flagging, and I know we did the episode with it, and some of you might have listened to the episode. If not, go and have a listen to the founder story, and to Rico Adler, who's the solution specialist from there, because they're interesting people and they're very knowledgeable. But they grew out of a 5 billion e-commerce retailer about you. So they are e-commerce people who've built a proprietary technology, grown it to a 5 billion euro business, and now spun that tech out into a platform, and now have hived that off into Scayle as a separate business, running platform as a service. So all of the capability that omnichannel business needed, including things like the full omnichannel ordering and management into order management end to end. It's got a PIM, not comparable to some of the market leading PIMs, but it's got a decent solid PIM in it. It's got lots and lots of capability, and interestingly, from a license point of view, because it's targeting 100 million plus businesses, it's 0.5% versus like a Salesforce, which is typically around 1%. So it's got quite an interesting cost model on top of having loads and loads of features. And I think it sets a specific type of business that wants something that a platform that provides a lot under the hood, rather than bringing in lots of extra best of breed. So very different to the SaaS like Shopify's BigCommerce, which is all about apps and an interconnected ecosystem. This is more about lots of cool functionality. So yeah, I have been impressed, and I also like their philosophical outlook and how they approach clients. I don't know what you've made of Scayle this year.
Yeah, so I haven't seen it as closely as you have. I've obviously listened to the podcast, and I've spoken to them a couple of times, but they seem impressive. The other thing that I've definitely noticed is that they're very well connected, because a lot of people are talking about very quickly. So I'm intrigued to hear more about them. I think, and then the other one would probably be Shopify, which will be interesting to see how they get on next year. So I think both of that, I've certainly only seen bits of it. I want to do an episode with them, but they are massive in Asia, in certain Asian markets. So yeah, I'm quite intrigued to see how they kind of go to market next year, but they are picking up a few deals, and I have started hearing about them more and more.
Yeah, agreed. I'm intrigued. And we obviously know, so Deepak and David, who went across from BigCommerce there, and they're smart guys and they know the industry inside out. So I'm intrigued on that GTM stuff as well. But I'm also intrigued to see how Shopify is it, because at face value, in terms of how it's positioned in the market, it seems very, very similar, and it's got its own payments, etc. So I'm really intrigued to get under the hood and see where the points of difference are and what type of business it's going for. And the other thing is, as proprietary platforms, because there's a couple of platforms out there where they provide a platform, and they provide the professional services, and they build that probably don't get spoken about as much, but are silently going along and acquiring, not silently, that's the wrong way to do it, but less vocally going away and just doing a really good job of maintaining their customers and acquiring new customers. And so the likes of like Visualsoft to get an honourable mention, but Remarkable Commerce is the one that I see quite a bit of. And I've been really impressed by what Brad and the team over there are doing. They really do know what their customers want, and they focus their roadmap on it. So they've added some really cool stuff this year around trigger promotions. They've put a DAM in as well for the CMS. They've done the OpenAI integration. I know OpenAI and ChatGPT stuff is table stakes now in platforms, but it's good to see these platforms that don't have such big development resources, the likes of a Shopify or BigCommerce, putting this stuff in place for their clients. They've had marquee wins as well, including Hotter Shoes and M&Co. So they're winning some really cool new clients as well. They've got really good retention rate for existing. But what I love about it is they've got a really interesting roadmap coming in 2024. So they have a really good page builder CMS already in the platform native for those who don't want to invest in a specialist third party. And they're adding personalization in 2024. So I'm going to be keen to find out a bit more about what that means and what level of personalization, but I think that's a really smart move. So yeah, really, really impressed at these platforms in the face of really stiff competition from businesses that obviously have deeper R&D and marketing pockets are still doing really, really well. And it's great to see that in the industry. So how about, sorry, were you going to say something on that?
Yeah, the last one I was going to add, I was just going to say commerce layer. Like, I think given that they often go head to head with the commerce tools and some of the other ones, I think they've been winning some good brands, and also they seem to be in a lot of the big tender processes. So I've been really impressed with that. Rafa, I think, was this year. That was like the big one. And we've had them on the podcast, Ecommerce there. But yeah, I've just been quite impressed. Like, I haven't actually seen loads of the platform, but I've been quite impressed with how they've been like chipping away at the market, to be honest. I think they'll probably do fairly well for certain types of businesses over the next year or two.
Yeah, and from when we looked to them and the way that Felipe position it is, they've built a headless solution for engineers, right, for engineering teams. So if a business has its own in-house resource and it wants to have greater control and it wants to drive a lot of the development, it's a really well-aligned platform. Interesting. Now let's do our final bit, which is like third apps, other functionality around the core platforms, what's hot, what's not. And let's start with what hasn't been hot. And I'm delighted by this because it really wound me up in 21 to 22, how obsessive people were talking about this. Web3 and metaverse, like how everyone's going to hang out in the metaverse, everyone's going to shop in the metaverse. And I know there have been some successful brand collaborations. I know that some of the big consumer brands and fashion brands have done some cool things. But basically it's died off. I don't hear anybody, and this is probably a reflection of the type of business I work with, but I don't hear anybody talking on any level about wanting to put any investment in this. Like, are you seeing it? Is anyone across your client base like that?
Not, I mean, some areas of Web3, I think some, Web3 technology is still used in places, and maybe some of the gaming stuff, but no, not at all. I mean, I was really excited when it came about, and like the kind of stuff people just looking to do because it was all so new. But yeah, I think as some people predicted, it has just kind of disappeared, to be honest. And I think we don't have any clients that are really looking at like NFTs or some of the other areas that people were looking at before.
Yeah, exactly. I had a personal dislike of it simply because I work with a few businesses, like brands who hadn't got their basics right and weren't willing to spend the money on fixing it for their customers and stuff that people really want. Like better search, better merchandising, but instead was quite happy to go and invest in some like absolutely bonkers NFT scheme, even though they had no idea whether their customers actually had the technology to. It's just, I found that mental. So I'm not denigrating it entirely, but I'm very glad that the initial hype and the self-interest that was driving that hype has died away in a lot of e-commerce. We talked about live shopping, about how it's. I still think it's got real potential. I think if businesses look at it and understand it as an event management and marketing piece rather than just an e-commerce technology piece, that they might be able to get some proper pilots working. So I've seen some good case studies over the years with beauty and fashion where it's really driven good sales volume, and it's encouraged people to shop wider across a product range by doing it. But it hasn't really gone anywhere. So I'm going to put my head out there and say, I reckon maybe next year we'll see something in this, but I'm not overly hopeful because I'm not hearing the chatter anymore about it.
Yeah, I think, it's still massive in Asia, and I think that's where a lot of it came from. And I think, TikTok still want to play on it as like, a big part of their long-term vision. But yeah, I think in order for it to become like the norm, like some of the bigger brands will need to, focus on that, I think, with drops and new launches and all of that, and I think that's the thing, like there's just not enough people doing it for it to become more mainstream, but I agree it's got loads of potential.
What have I seen that's hot this year? Loyalty has been the big one for amongst my clients, and loyalty should always be important because we should be rewarding people for shopping and encouraging them to. But I think what I've seen in 2023 is more businesses investing in specialist third-party tech platforms. So that whether that's a Yotpo or, there are lots of different loyalties. There's Smile, Yotpo, etc. But thinking beyond basic points win prizes, which is, for me, it's a very lazy form of loyalty, is every time you spend, you get some points, get a discount at the checkout. But given the fact that retailers discount like crazy anyway, it kind of gets lost. Is okay, you get an extra 5% off, but when you're being given 10% here, 15%, or buy two get one free, all this stuff, I find that just basic points doesn't really land, and you don't seem to get such great redemptions. I've seen a lot of loyalty schemes where people have just got points and they're not using them because they've tuned out. The more of my clients are looking at tiers, how they reward people through behavior to move up the tiers to get better perks. And the perks aren't just product based. They can be like free content. It can be events. It can be like, anniversary gifts. But then the big thing is people are now finally obviously some were before, but more people are now realizing that you've got to tie this in with other areas like reviews. If you want to take reviews seriously, you've got to try and reward people for that positive behavior. So looking at all the ways that customers define what is valuable to them, and then packing that into loyalty. I know loyalty was my big one. You said CDP, so do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. Well, I think these two kind of are a bit intertwined. So I think a lot of our clients are basically, obviously retention is a massive focus at the minute. It always has been, but it's even bigger at the minute. And then I think a lot of our clients, like one of the big things, or one of the big objectives going into their roadmap is first party data. So I think there's different strands to that. So a lot of our clients have rolled out like membership and or VIP, and they've tried to essentially get more people building accounts, more people giving them more data as part of an account build process or as part of some level of process. And I think that together has been one major trend. And I then think, so essentially capture more data. And then I think that and more complex businesses wanting to invest in data has led to more people looking at CDPs. So we've definitely seen that as a trend. Klaviyo's new one has also put it on a lot of people's radars because there's a lower barrier to entry and a lot of people using Klaviyo. And then you've obviously got other providers that are, more specialist and maybe a bit more advanced. And then the only other one that I was also going to bring into that same grouped thing was I think a lot of people are trying to plan for more changes around cookies and privacy. So things like, if you look at Solomon in particular and how they proposition the account, and it's like the base level of loyalty, but realistically, they want more data, one for personalization and CRM, but also for tracking purposes. So I think that's the other one that I would kind of like tie in together. But I think, those together are a massive trend at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. And the other one that I would pull out is the social commerce and TikTok shop. That seems to be in especially in D2C brands. Everyone, I don't work in paid media. I know you guys do. That's the cool part of your agency side. But everyone I talk to, TikTok shop is on people's minds. And TikTok seems to be really doubling down on this. I know like in the US, they got the partnership with ShipBob to help businesses to be able to like use ShipBob's fulfillment engine and network centers so they can, DC brands can quickly launch on it and have all of their order management done. I know you've talked about TikTok integrations being really important to a lot of your businesses. Have you seen, has this been consistent across all different industries, or have you seen this focus in specific areas like fashion?
So I haven't seen much around TikTok shop. I think a lot of our clients are still thinking about Instagram shopping as something that will get bigger. And I think a lot of our clients but they are taking TikTok very seriously for brand awareness and also as an advertising channel now. But I think it will just get bigger and bigger, to be honest. And like Duyong in China, which is part of the same company, or in Asia, which is part of the same parent company, that's massive part of their strategy. And I think it will come to TikTok and our market. But I think the other interesting one will be Instagram. And like they recently removed the shop tab, which was surprising. And a lot of our brands, or at least one in particular, has really complained about that. But from what I understand, that's still a big part of their plan. But I think it's like, I feel like everyone knows this is going to get big, but they just don't know when. That's kind of, or at least everyone thinks this is going to get big. And I think TikTok seemed to have more of a plan than maybe Meta do. But it's such an interesting area, but I just haven't seen enough traction yet, but it's just, you assume it's going to be massive.
I find it interesting because social is not my area. I deliberately moved out of it a while back because it's so nuanced and complex, and you need to be on top of it day in, day out. And I'm a Luddite in my personal life. Haven't been on I still got Facebook for about 6 years, and I'm quite happy about that. Right, so let's stop there. Hopefully this has been useful for people. This is basically our basic download of what we saw in 2023, what we thought was interesting, key technology trends. Fire in the comments wherever you've been reading or watching this. Let us know what else have you seen? What were your key technology takeouts from 2023? What do you think is going to really take off in 2024? Anything we've talked about you don't agree with, call us out on it. That's cool. We like listening and we like having a debate. And thanks for listening. Keep your ear open for your next episode. And we look forward to you continue being a listener in 2024. Take care, everyone. For more information on this topic, head over to replatform.fm for our audio podcasts. To discuss a project, or if you'd like to chat about any of the topics covered in this episode in more detail, please reach out to myself, James Gurd, or my co-host, Paul Rogers, via LinkedIn and Twitter. Thanks again for listening, and keep your ears peeled for the next episode.